Warren Buffett, he said, I'm a better businessman because I'm an investor, and I'm a better investor because I'm a businessman. You get to see it from both sides. So you being a podcaster, a creator of so much content, but then also owning the production studio that helps other creators create so much content, you're seeing so much more than the average person on one side of the house. So it's going to be really fun to ask you about all of these little things.
Yeah, like some of the stuff from last year is now this year popping off like crazy. And some of my biggest like channel drivers and audience growth drivers.
Did you already know? And I said we just roll with this.
Yeah, here we are.
Because this is such a good topic. Were they already clips popping off last year that are now continuing to, or was it kind of like sleeper clips?
More kind of the sleeper. And actually for me, this year, I've been really focusing on YouTube content. So the podcast is my main thing, but then really prioritizing like how I structure and format and even topics and guests that I know or I'm finding that work well on YouTube. And this year specifically, some of the content that I put out last year on the YouTube channel have just been keep climbing. Like there are probably like 3 videos now that daily get thousands of views, give me thousands of new subscribers every week. And it's from stuff that's 8 months old, 4 months, 8 months, and a year.
Man, okay, for listeners, I'm excited for you all to get a podcasting masterclass, content creation masterclass.
No pressure.
Yeah, right. I think you're going to be able to deliver. It's almost like when I'm building a business as a founder, I use so much, and this is a phrase from Warren Buffett. He said, I'm a better businessman because I'm an investor, and I'm a better investor because I'm a businessman. You get to see it from both sides. So you being a podcaster, a creator of so much content, but then also owning the production studio that helps other creators create so much content, you're seeing so much more than the average person on one side of the house. So it's going to be really fun to ask you about all of these little things. It's going to be basically free consulting for the Magic Minds podcast. But also, I'm really excited to jump into all of your story to becoming a health and wellness coach, in addition to essentially a media titan when it comes to creating. I mean, you were just walking through all of the different studios you have.
Titan, that's a big word,
dude. I've never met anyone that has this many hands on this many podcasts. So it's pretty. You got a wealth of experience that, especially with our little podcast, this is going to be, like I said, free consulting and going to be amazing. But any listener that's thinking about doing a podcast or has a podcast, this is also going to be specifically really interesting to them. Every one of our listeners cares about the health and wellness side of things. So they're also going to love the insight that you bring from that. And then I'm excited to hear about your story. Everybody that gets into neck deep, eyeballs deep, like complete career shift into health and wellness usually has a really interesting and typically inspiring story. Knowing the little bit that I do about your story, I'm also excited for the personal side of things. But just that topic on how things go viral or how things pop off of content created. We were just saying right before we hit record that a friend of mine here in LA is co-founder of Lionsgate, and he said the secret to Hollywood, as I was just saying, the secret to Hollywood is no one knows anything.
That's so reassuring.
So reassuring. And the context that it came out, it was with our ads for Magic Mind. We do 30 ads, 30 tests a month. We have no idea what will pop off, what will resonate with people. We'll put 10 grand behind a highly produced 30-second piece of content, and it does nothing, crickets. And then we'll put something out that's just a snippet of a conversation, and that was free, and it's just in our content bag. And we're like, let's test this. And it does. For 8 weeks, people are loving it.
Man.
It's for 12 weeks. Some of our ads will run for 4 or 5 million, 20 million views over the course of 8, 10, 12 weeks. So by the way, if you have any questions on mic, off mic around performance marketing or anything.
I feel like we're just going to be asking for each other's notes for everything we do.
I'm so down.
This.
So down. But okay. that is very reassuring for us in the content creation side of things, and probably for listeners that it might take how long for something that's one of your most valuable pieces of content today. How long did it take before you knew, wow, people are really resonating with that?
So I've been podcasting for 834 episodes, about 7.5 years now. And that's such a unique question, because for me, what has kept me going on this particular platform, on this particular form of content, is because of what it does for me and how much I enjoy it and how much it just enhances my own cognition, self-development, knowledge, and when I started it, I was actually still full-time working as a clinical health coach and wellness director. It made me better at my profession. And so very quickly, like to answer your question, immediately it gave me that feedback. It gave me that kind of personal virality that I love doing this. This is what I'm meant to do. And this is what I know for many, many, many years to come is going to keep giving me that passion and purpose and fulfillment. Pretty quickly, I started Ever Forward Radio in 2017. Now, by current standards, I think a lot of people would go, oh my God, you're like a grandfather in podcasting. You've been doing it for ages. But I wouldn't even say I was an early adopter. I think just, over the last couple of years, podcasting has gotten a lot of notoriety and people are flocking to it. And now I joke because my brother started one a couple of years ago. Literally everybody and their brother has a podcast now. But, it's been around actually for 20 years now. The first RSS feed was published over 20 years ago. So since 2017 is really not a grandfather. Right. But I think now when I get feedback now, when I got feedback with episode 1, it was just so, I hate to say the word validating because that's not why I did it. Or if I didn't get that public validation, I would still find a way to do this. I'm very grateful that now it's turned into something that is my main income. It's what I do for a living. I'm a professional podcaster. But even if it wasn't, I would still make sure I would find a way to keep doing it because it's that fulfilling. And I'm sure you can relate, as you sit down with people, you learn so much, you just engage with people.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Connection, networking. All of just like the personal fulfillment that comes with it. I have not found anything else that comes close. And so I kind of say all that just to let you and the listener know that for me, it was immediate. That feedback was, I love doing it. It's what I'm meant to do. I'm going to keep finding a way to keep doing it. And then, hey, this is like really helpful. It's very, informative. And I think it was pretty unique too, because I come from a health sciences background. So I was able to not only just be a person talking, but, I came from expertise and all the things I talk about are well within my scope of practice.
I could absolutely corroborate that I would say, so I started a startup focused as an investor and startups for the last 12 years. 5 years ago is when I started a startup focused podcast. Did that for 4 years. Then we had our second and then our third daughter. And I was like, I got to dial one of the projects back. So I dialed the startup podcast back that had nothing really to do with Magic Mind. And then the team at Magic Mind a year later, about a year ago, was like, hey, could you bring that back and make it Magic Minds? Make it about, I say health and wellness, but the guests that we have are like, we have physicists that have come on the podcast. So it really does fit just much more the title of getting to chat with magical minds. But I've never chatted in 5 years of podcasting. I've never chatted, much less like recorded the conversation with a podcasting like expert that's been on both sides of the table for as many episodes of your own podcast as well as others, to even chat about the nuances within podcasting or creating content. But like I said, it's just these three little fun buckets of conversation that I'm really excited about: the podcasting side of things, your own personal story, and then the health and wellness side of things. So these three things are going to be fun. But on this topic of the means justified the means day one, to where it wasn't like, okay, in 3 years, in 4 years, this will pay off. Like building a company, a lot of times it's like, all right, in 2 or 3 years, we'll start to see, maybe 16 months. That's what I always tell founders, like, don't expect it to feel validated for 16 months. And I have no idea why 16 is the number that I see so often in my own projects and other people's projects. But everyone thinks like, okay, 3-4 months in, maybe 8 months in, maybe I'll get validation, but it's so much longer than you think. But to your point, you were spot on with podcasting. The first episode that I did with he was the co-founder of Twitch. It's like, good God, just getting to have an hour with co-founder of Twitch. Dude, I would have paid for that, much less it was already so the means justified the means.
Absolutely.
Like it didn't need to go anywhere.
Absolutely.
I do want to know, when creating content, when did it start to, outside of your own personal appreciation, when did it start to pick up a bit of momentum where you're like, all right, this investment of time and money start to give you some type of return on that investment outside of the personal investment that you were just talking about?
You know, I feel like when I launched my show in 2017, it was pretty rare to have a podcast. And I'd come from, at that point, I'd already started, I'd been on YouTube, started, vlogging, and kind of was dabbling like a lot of people at that time of making a thing out of social media. And it was a new platform for my already established audiences. It was a new, longer format platform for my YouTube channel, Instagram, and it was pretty novel, like in general. Not everybody and their brother, like I said, could just, you can bounce around to a bajillion different podcasts to listen to during the week and get same or similar content. So it was novel. And so in 2017, I think being novel and already having like a pretty decent following on some other platforms, I mean, literally nothing crazy, but just, being in that world, I was able to introduce something new to an established audience that picked up traction pretty quickly. The first year, I think we accumulated about 275,000 downloads.
Wow.
And that was just doing an episode a week while working a full-time job as a clinical health coach. And so, I was like, all right, there's something going on here. Mm-hmm. And I think the novelty of it at the time had a lot to do with kind of that initial traction. And then also because
novelty of your own show, or novelty of podcasting?
I think both. I think both. And it was also during a time when my brother and some other like close friends had become, very popular YouTubers. And so I had exposure to a lot of variety of types of audiences. And so I think in that growing era, that 2013 to 2015 kind of growing era of people really becoming very invested in, I want to subscribe to your channel. I want to follow you on Instagram for more than just a cool filter. I want to, be a part of your life, be involved with your content. I'm curious in how you do what you do, why you do what you do. And so I think people were kind of just going from one platform to another. Oh, I followed you on Instagram because I found your YouTube channel. How else can I connect with you? How else can I get plugged into this world? And so I'm kind of speculating here, but just kind of knowing my audience from direct feedback that, I came to your podcast because I came from your YouTube channel, because I came from your brother's YouTube channel, and I came from his other 3 big YouTube friends. And so it was just kind of like this growing ecosystem of platforms and audiences, and then audiences wanting more platforms, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Meaning to bounce between YouTube to Spotify to Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, Spotify at the time wasn't as invested as they are now in the podcasting space. Podcasts back then, it's weird to say that, but it was really like truly just a podcast. It was just audio. Right. I mean, there were people already doing video with it back in 2017 and 18, but it wasn't really, not like we're doing now in the studio. Mm-hmm. And so I think that also played a role because people were already getting the visual. They were able to watch somebody on YouTube, get the video. There wasn't video on Instagram at that time. I don't think so. So you got kind of like the pictures and you got the tutorial and you got to kind of follow along with people in that format. So we had photo, we had video. Podcasting was this other tertiary platform that was just siloed in that one kind of media format of just audio. And so I think it gave people, and again, I'm kind of painting a picture unique to my world. My world was social media, YouTube and social media in like the fitness community. And so it was a way for people to, put me in their ear, to put this content in their ear when they were working out, when they were in the gym, when they were taking a walk, when they're on the treadmill, when they're in the car. Because that's kind of, I think, how people really got going listening to podcasts was
commutes. And
because that's how I got started. I found podcasting in my horrendous drive in DC, being stuck 45 minutes, 2 hours sometimes. And I would just throw on a podcast, or if I'm doing cardio or on the treadmill warming up, I'd put on a podcast.
When did you move to LA?
About 6 years ago.
Okay, great. Well, we'll come back to the podcasting side of things. I want listeners to get a sense for you and your story, but rounding that out, how should someone not start a podcast?
They should
in 2024.
They should not start a podcast thinking that they're going to put it out into the world and be Joe Rogan or be any other popular podcast. They should not put it out and think that, because I have a podcast, everybody's going to come listen and I'm going to get 10,000 downloads, 1 million downloads, all this stuff. Right now, the national average for podcasting in the United States, the national average, so half, in the middle of all shows produced, put out there, in a 30-day window, the average is about 140 to 145 downloads, which if you go by statistics, if you're getting that, great. You're right in 50%, right in the middle. So when I say that, I think you can go one of two ways. You can get very disheartened and go, that's it. I get
Dude,
more.
My mind goes straight to how the hell else can you reach 140 people?
Exactly. And so that's what I think it takes, expectation for somebody to really be successful in podcasting. I always go back to this analogy, in our production company, when we, launch a new show or, consult with somebody or I just talk to another podcaster. When I say that, they get either very discouraged or very happy. And if they go the more discouraged route, I'll tell them, okay, imagine this. You buy an office space and you don't tell anybody what you're going to do with it. And then just one day you show up and you just start talking. You walk into that empty space, you start talking for an hour, 2 hours, and then slowly people just start walking by and start coming in and they just stand there and they listen to what you have to say. If in 30 days you had 150 people, 140, 45 people just coming in to stand and listen to what you have to say, just by you doing that, that's pretty damn impressive. Mm-hmm. If you are in a room with 145 people, that's a lot different. So I want to challenge people, if you're in the podcasting space or thinking about it, think that way. If you're walking into a room day after day, week after week, and you're just talking, you got 145 people coming in, that's a lot of minds and hearts that are there and they care about what you have to say. So don't knock that.
Right.
It all then kind of matters how you want to leverage it, what you want it to be. I mean, growth is great, but right now, 2024, I still don't say that we are saturated. I don't think podcasting is saturated because the rise in popularity is, of course, there. In the last 2, now 3 years, there has been more growth in podcasting than there has been in the 16 years before that. Mm. There are, I think, last I checked, Apple Podcasts, I think pushing 5 million published podcasts out there, but barely 40% of them are active, meaning they put out at least one new episode every 90 days. The average is about 8 to 10 episodes. A new show will come out, they'll put out about 8 to 10 episodes. They're not Joe Rogan. They're not Call Her Daddy. They're not whoever. And then they just give up. And so it's growing. And so I say that because it's growing, not everybody is staying. So it's getting diluted. I think it's getting diluted, not saturated.
What else would go in that bucket of what not to do? If you're thinking of starting a podcast, let's say you're one episode in, how would you not start a podcast given everything you see? That's a great tip of just, the root of all frustration comes down to mismanaged expectations. So that is a great one.
Yeah.
What other aspects do you see people do and you're like, oh, no, I wouldn't do it that way?
I think right now, a lot of people are still going the route of like heavy intro, lengthy intro. And this is something that someone's going to go listen to my show and go like, Chase, your intro is too long. This is something I'm, still fine tuning more and more. Look, podcasting is a long format content, and where we are right now in 2024 and in the world, like everywhere is saturated by short format content. If I don't have your attention in 3 seconds, I don't have your attention. And now we're seeing that creep into the world of podcasting by click-through rates, listen rates. Your download doesn't count unless someone clicks play on your podcast, on your RSS feed, and they're there for 30 seconds. So you're losing a lot of people. And this is how I've even begun to condense down or even really manipulate how I do intros in terms of stitching together different clips and things like that. So you've got 30 seconds. And well, think short format for your long format. You have 3 seconds to hook them for at least 30 seconds to get that download to count. So don't get so bogged down. And I guess what I'm trying to say really is the traditional model of podcasting of recurring intro, theme music, transition, it just doesn't really work that way anymore. Now, yeah, of course, there are going to be outliers and people that already have huge and established audiences, and that's just their format. So don't start out that way, but also kind of on the other side of the coin, don't be afraid to completely just ditch the format. If you Google how to make a podcast, what makes a successful podcast, what is the podcasting model, format, formula, you're probably going to see, and I think a lot of people model after intro. I got to have my theme music, got to have my recurring intro, and then I intro the episode, and then it's boom, 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 boom. Podcasting has changed so much over the years. I think largely probably due to all the new shows. So there's attention span issues, and then short format content kind of creeping in. So don't go the old route in the format, and don't be afraid right now to completely change up, especially that front portion of your show.
That is a great segue to, what would someone do in 2017, 2018 that now in 2024 is totally different, to where you'd be like, man, in 2024, do it this way. And it's actually a great, I remember reading recently, even starting a podcast right into the conversation without an intro and who the guest is, which is, basically just copy and pasting from something like Joe Rogan. Yeah. Does not work because they don't have the context or history of listening to you for 5 years. So copying and pasting from the fat head of podcasts does not work. What other things from like 2017, 2018 that if you were to try to copy and paste today, you'd see lackluster results, or things that are brand new in 2024 that you're like, holy shit, this is like completely new, novel, and very few people are doing it?
That's a really good question. I would say, I'm going back to think, in 2017 to 18, what worked really well for me and some other podcasters I knew at the time was, I guess you could call it, for lack of a better term, collabing, which was kind of a big thing, in the YouTube days, hey, I'm going to come on your YouTube channel. You're going to come on my YouTube channel. We're going to cross-pollinate audiences. And it's really kind of hard to say that because it can work. If you want more podcast listeners, go to where they are, go out to other podcasts. And so it worked really well, at least for me in 2017, 2018 to, hey, I'll come on your show, you come on mine. I have not seen that work anywhere close as well today in 2024 as it did back then.
Just because those people have been on 100 podcasts since then, so people aren't
that's a big part of it. It's now in 2017 and 18, if I wanted to hear you, I could probably only find you, unless you were just diehard in the paint, aware of podcasting. I could probably maybe find you on half a dozen shows a year, maybe. Right. Now I can probably find you on half a dozen shows a day. Especially if you're a business person, entrepreneur, if that's part of your content game. I mean, you're just getting booked or being booked out on other shows all the time, or you got your own show kind of putting it out. And so 2017, 18 worked really well to collaborate, to find other similar shows and podcasters. I think probably my first like 15, 20 episodes, that's what I was doing a lot of. And luckily enough, I had some fellow YouTubers that were starting podcasts. And so we were each other's guinea pigs kind of thing. So collaborating then worked really well, kind of just show swapping. That doesn't work. I don't see it working really anywhere close as well now in 2024. And what I do see working really, really well now in 2024, that was not part of my strategy then, honestly, I wish it was, because I would have had longevity on this platform, was optimizing for YouTube. And This year, I'm in a very like divided place with even saying that to myself, much less out loud, because in my heart, I'm a podcaster. And podcasters, what does that mean? You know, you have an RSS feed and you kind of go by these like old school ways of being a podcast. The way that I wanted to go with the show, particularly for leveling up production and, you know, turning it even to, you know, next level part of my business, was I wanted to tap into YouTube, you know, through AdSense and making YouTube money and all that stuff. And so this year, 2024, I've maybe looked at my like host site analytics like 2 or 3 times this year in terms of like downloads and demographics and all that stuff. I have only been prioritizing YouTube strategy. And I did that because...
And for listeners, the host site, that would be like for your podcast audio
Podbean,
stats.
Libsyn,
so you don't really
Megaphone.
care as much about your podcast audio stats as the YouTube stats, you're saying?
No. And I have to let me expand on that. I chose to do that this year for a couple of different reasons. One of them being I have already invested so much time and effort and resources into video production. I mean, in studios, and I've been shooting video for my show since 2019-ish. And so I really love it. I prioritize in-person interviews. So in person, I feel kind of weird just sitting down recording audio. I want audio and video, plus now, you know, chop it up and put it on a lot of different platforms. And and I also was able to do that because I was at a point with my show where it was fully monetized. It's my main source of income. I have great partners and, you know, great products and services that have done really well. So I was able to kind of put that on hold and not need to go, air quote here, hunting as much in 2024 for partnerships, for traditional podcast partnerships as years in the past. So I took what was working. I was like, okay, as long as I just keep that, you know, honor the partnerships, honor what I need to do in the podcasting world to keep that going and not let it, you know, go to shit. Now I'm going to really focus on YouTube. So what I did was I just researched like crazy and still do podcasts or topics and guests that already work well on YouTube. And so I prioritize those topics and guests for coming on the podcast, and then put it out. And then I also have begun to just I really don't consume hardly any content, and definitely not any other podcasts. And if I do, I'm only looking at other shows at high video production level to kind of like take notes. I don't compare. I take notes, and I really look at a handful of other shows.
Why that qualification of I don't compare?
Because, you know, I think it's a slippery slope. People, if you want to try to level up anything you're doing, I think it's smart to look at your quote competition or other people doing the same or similar thing. And if you do not have a level of awareness going into that, you might find yourself, unbeknownst to you, just stuck in comparison. And then you're just, you know, negative self-talk, and you're beating yourself down. Why am I not good enough? Why is this not growing? Blah, blah, blah. And so I just look at it as everyone that I look at, I am their student. I'm here to learn. I'm here to, in one way, kind of get validation for things. Okay, they're doing that. I'm doing this. Okay, check. I view them as successful in my world. So if they're doing it, I'm doing it. Good. Like, why did they add that transition there? Or, they really are prioritizing the intros. Like, they went from like a 90-second intro to maybe like a 47 intro. They're not adding sponsors in the YouTube. They're only just monetizing through YouTube. Is that good or bad? Is that smart? They're putting their ads at the front. They're waiting 20 minutes in, 45 minutes in. So I really just I dissect. And so choosing to do that because a podcast was in a position to where I could, I really dove into researching topics and guests that work really well on YouTube in kind of similar world of health, wellness, personal development, like Everforward Radio is. And so I've just really just put it all in there. And that's been my focus this year.
Will you walk me through how specifically you dive into topics and guests? Like, what does that work look like? And then what are the things that you're like, oh, dang, okay, this is a potential magic formula?
So it's part active, part passive. Even the passive is a little bit active, but there are great tools and resources out there. And I have no partnership with this company, but vidIQ is a great platform. I think they have a free version and a paid version, which I don't think is a lot. It's maybe like $9.99, $12.99 a month or something. And what you can do is if you have a YouTube channel, you can plug in your account and you can plug in other, I think they even call them competitors, which vidIQ, I wish you would change that. You can put in like similar channels. So I would put, my channel, and I would search for and find 3 to 5 other channels that I view my audience probably is going over there. I look at similar topics, similar guests, and it will rank us. So it'll kind of put our topics and guests in last 3-5 videos, whatever, and it'll show you how well they performed. It'll look at views, subscribers, titles, thumbnails. So it's a great tool that does a lot of work for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it still takes work, but it's a great tool that I put into my workflow. So that's kind of more the passive one. Active is me, what looks like kind of sitting on my couch, maybe Sunday mornings or, in downtime in between interviews, just watching YouTube videos.
What's an example of one where you kind of stitched these things together? Okay, right top. Maybe recently we're like, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense.
I like specific shows.
Yeah.
So I model a lot, or I research a lot of Diary of a CEO, Modern Wisdom, Drew Prohit, Impact Theory, The Model Health Show, and probably I look at School of Greatness, not as much anymore. Just like the design kind of angle that Lewis went was just a way. The way that he went with the design in terms of like post-production and like these After Effects and stuff, I quickly realized I'm not going to go that route. So I feel like it would be a waste of my time to try to take notes from somebody that is doing something that's clearly working for them, but I have no interest in kind of going that route in terms of just like design and production.
Dude, you have such a wealth of information. You're an expert on a topic that we all consume these things, but rarely do we get to ask someone the question on the specifics of like, dude, I've got a million questions as you're talking, but so finish. I want you to be able to finish that question or that answer, but of like a specific one where it's piecing together different elements. You're like, okay, this will make for a great episode. But man, I would love to ask you just about. Yeah, I've got a few different questions. And then we will pause so listeners can get the true background on.
Well, and I'll preface this by saying, anybody, if you go look up on YouTube Everforward Radio, I mean, I'm not like crushing it like crazy, but I will say this: I am very happy and very proud of all my efforts that I put in for the success that I've had this year.
Dude, you've got a great podcast, amazing podcast.
Thank you.
And I think people, if they want to go to chasechewning.com, you can see, and we'll put the link in the show notes, everything that your hands are on, because it's also just even the production side of things is, I'm in this studio right now and it's so impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you for the hospitality to record.
Of course, anytime.
But yeah, so give me an example of a specific episode where you're like, oh, that's magic.
I think it was on his main channel. Actually, I don't know. It wasn't on his podcast channel, but Stephen Bartlett, he has Diary of a CEO, which is a huge, amazing podcast. And then he has a secondary channel. And on that channel, he does kind of a lot of like lifestyle stuff. But he put up one video, and I forget the title, but he put up one video, basically kind of, here's how me and my team go about creating our podcast. And I mean, he has a team. He has so many full-time people on just creating thumbnails, pre-production, post-production. He's at a high level. Of course, he came in being a very well-established entrepreneur, multimillionaire, able to kind of like invest time and resources out of the gate to make a successful show work. Not to say that he and his team don't do work, they do. But he put out a video on his other channel, and it just walked through kind of their approach to how they research, how they prep, how they cut, how they splice, how they put things in for the intro, different hooks, different calls to action. And I probably watched that episode a dozen times. And again, not because I want to, okay, I'm just going to copy and paste what you're doing, but you have to be able to look at people in your world that you deem at your level or better than you to be able, or even people that you can teach, because you can always learn something from that kind of rule of thirds. I live and die by the rule of thirds of there's people that I can teach, there are people at my level, and there are people that are my mentors and teachers. And if you have the right mindset when you go into any of those people in any of those environments, you should always be able to walk away learning something and giving something in return. And so I watched that video and I was just like, oh, wow. And it makes sense. And so I just began to apply. Really, the main thing was like the first 30 seconds to be able to get people to stay for the first 60 seconds, because I learned, every platform has their different algorithm. And that was kind of, I might be butchering the timing, but that's more or less kind of the same of, that's what YouTube is going to favor. If you can keep people in those sections of your video, it's going to keep them ideally for like the next or first like 3 minutes. And then that's how you get pushed out to the algorithm to recommend to similar channels or, similar topics and guests. And I started doing that. And ever since I started doing that, The channel went from about 1,200, 1,400 subscribers to now, I think like almost 40,000 subscribers.
Just on YouTube.
Just on YouTube. Yeah. So I went from an audience base, my downloads at that time on the podcast was already about almost 4 million. And then I've now this year added another like 2.4, almost 2.6 million in like total views and reach. And then I've also added like a whole new audience base of, now almost 40,000 subscribers. So I have one platform.
Dude, for listeners, for just context, that's crazy hard to get. There's the first 1,000, then the first 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Like YouTube is ruthless about just not giving you anything until you really show your worth. Yeah. So it takes most people 2 years to get to a couple thousand. Then maybe the algorithm starts to give them some love. Yeah. But for you to go from 1,200 to 40,000 in less than a year, that's insane. And
I attribute it to these two kind of tactics that I adopted as this is how I do my show now. And it's, I guess 1A is guest, 1B is topic. So I really research and try to find those guests and those topics that YouTube seems to already favor. Again, in either like as a whole, because, guests can go on a variety of different topics and themes of shows now. So you don't have to stay, I think, on YouTube as fixated or focused on just business category, if that's or just health and wellness, that's me. So that was kind of it. And then 2 was the intro. So what I did, and, I run a production company, podcast production company. We've been doing this for about 4 years now. And my show, I had my company edit. I had them do, I still did like the audio editing because I'm very picky about how and where I put in ads and things like that.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And so what I did for everything else, like I took back completely ownership of everything with my show. And so I was like, all right, Chase, can you do that? Do you really want to commit to take on all of this work? Because I was trying this out. I was going back and forth with my video editor, my team, not because like they couldn't do it, but I was so specific with, all right, move this clip there, swap this for that, zoom in, punch out, add effect kind of stuff. And I was like, this is wasting my time and theirs. So what if I just take the time to learn more? I already had experience with video editing from YouTube, like I said before, but that was just, kind of basic stuff. So I committed to learning Adobe Premiere, to video editing more.
That was this year.
Yeah.
So 6 years in, you're like, all right, I'm going to go back to school to learn the video editing side of things. Yeah.
And it saved me a lot of time and my editor a lot of time. I paid them, so it saved me money. And so I decided to double down on the time and the research and the prep and the kind of the self-teaching. And in my opinion, like it really paid off. And, I'm really happy with, like how I kind of go about editing. It's really all about like those intros and teasers and mashups, especially for YouTube in the beginning, kind of just really catching people to go, what is this person talking about? What are the hangs? What are the cliffhangers? What do I have to look forward to? And that's been, so guest, topic, and intro has been kind of the just main areas I've worked on. And that's what's kind of worked.
Okay, so you were watching the Diary of a CEO, that clip, and then what led to the idea or the combination in your head for an episode or something to where you're like, okay, I'm going to make that match. It sounds like you're stitching together a topic and a guest. So walk me through an example where it's like, okay, these two things fit together.
So I'll like double down what I all just said about the topic, the guests, and like the stitching. What kind of worked well for me for a few other videos to really catch on YouTube, two of the shows that I mentioned, I won't say who they were, but two of the shows that I mentioned that I was really modeling, I spoke directly to. And I was just kind of asking them, I really want to ramp up YouTube, can you give me a moment? And they were friends. And so they gave me their time, and they're like, Chase, just copy what I'm doing. I said, what do you mean? It's like literally copy, just copy the title, copy the thumbnail. And I was like, really? He's like, look, you're doing all the work, right? You're doing all the work. You're trying to do all this stuff, the editing, and you're getting the guests, and you've got this platform and blah, blah, blah. Like we're just testing stuff out, so test the thumbnail, test the clip, test the whatever. And so when I would get a guest, that was already performing really well. Let's say, you're coming on my show and I know in the last 30, 60 days, you have done a lot of other YouTube videos and they've really popped off. So I would go on and I would look to the ones that have performed the best in terms of views and click-throughs and stuff. And I would get very, very close to the same or similar title and same or similar thumbnail. And I know some people might kind of feel some way about
style.
that. But
Picasso, good artists copy, great artists steal, and you're
not getting the same interview. You're not getting the same edit. You're not getting the same anything. I mean, I also went back to the drawing board in every way possible in terms of prep for the show, in a way because I wanted to get more strategic, but also I realized I'd gotten kind of comfortable. I had kind of, kind of taken it for granted a little bit because, oh wow, like Chase, you have an established audience base. You've got a show. It's doing well. Like it takes just a little finesse just to keep alive. So like, why would you need to like start prepping like crazy even more? Now, part of that is because I had hundreds of episodes and years of experience to where I felt like, I could just, and this is just me in general, I could just sit down with you and we could talk for hours. But I felt like if I wanted the show to get better and I wanted to become even more competitive in terms of charts and rankings and downloads, and I wanted YouTube to work even more, I realized that my same format, my same approach wasn't going to work. And so the same just general, like, okay, I know enough about you. I've looked up some stuff, let's just sit down and talk and kind of keep it casual. For my goal that I wanted, that wasn't going to cut it. So I now spend probably, I'd say at least 3 to 4 hours prep per episode, some or more. And that prep is beyond just like guest research. I've expanded into, I will research questions. Just what are good questions? What are unique questions? I'll Google search, I'll YouTube search, just, even using some AI stuff, with these keywords or these themes or in these categories, these genres, what are just really unique questions? And I will listen to, and this is another great thing that helped me in podcast growth was I began to really get out of my categories. So I stopped listening I didn't really listen to a lot of shows, but I stopped listening to health, wellness, personal development. I started listening to like comedy and sexual health and travel and leisure and personal journals, and just I wanted to hear questions that people were asking that really caught me off guard, that were very engaging and that were just so different, but I could somehow make them work in my show. Because when I did that, I would catch my guests off guard, which is what I'm after. I don't want you to get into autopilot for the thing that you're here to talk about. I want you to have the most unique, positive, engaging experience conversationally with me. One, because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want you to walk out the door and going, wow, that could have been literally anybody and could have said the same thing. I also care because on the backside of podcasting, it's all relationships. 95% of every guest I've ever had on the show, we talk, we text, we email, we go to each other's events. I won't see you for a year, but when I do, we catch up very easily. So the relationship aspect is very important to me. But really for like the growth aspect, I knew if I did that, and I've seen it work, that is going to be such a unique experience for my audience. They can't get that anywhere else. So they have to come to me. And when you walk out of the door having that experience, you, the guests, are way more inclined to actually give a shit about promoting the episode. Mm-hmm. And because we're such in a diluted market right now with podcasting, man, like it's not uncommon for you to be out on half a dozen, if not more shows a week. You're not going to promote them all. And even if you do, you're just going to be resharing.
Right.
You're just going to be like, oh, I did this, did that, or my team's going to get to it. But if you go, oh man, like I have never been asked those questions. This guy did his homework. I felt seen. I felt heard. I felt respected. He clearly did his research in my backstory, my area of expertise. Like he cares so much. I cannot not care about sharing this episode out in a totally unique way. That is attention grabbing for your host and for the guest. That is attention grabbing for your audience. And that's what just keeps people coming back.
What are some of your favorite questions that you've picked up?
Ooh. I could cheat and look at my phone.
Please do. No, actually, dude.
Really?
Do. Oh,
Okay.
I always tell guests, use the phone. If we have to look something up or fact check something, I'm like, dude, let's get rid of the artificiality. It's not TV, it's podcasting. So we can, but yeah, I would love to know. I'm sure listeners probably thinking the same thing of like, man, if he's done all this research of great questions.
So take these. And I want to preface this by saying, one person, so besides other podcasters and stuff, there's a guy, Danny Miranda. He's a podcaster, the Danny Miranda podcast. He probably has just the most innate knack for good questions. And I'm sure he has a really unique process for looking them up as well. But go listen to Danny Miranda, his content and just his questions. Chef's kiss. Yeah. So after that, I have folders for every guest, and I'll go through like my questions, and I'll get, especially if it's like an inbound pitch from a PR company or a book or agency, whatever, they'll kind of prompt you with some stuff, and I'll use some of them, but I don't want to use a lot of them because again, they're giving them out to every show, so it's going to be the same experience. So I have this folder called just questions, and I have this one subfolder called random, and this is great because it just catches people off. Yeah. So I'll ask them, what's your sun, moon, and rising? Now that works well if you're in here in LA because we're kind of getting into like the woo, or, if I feel like you have any kind of spiritual aspect, or honestly, even if you don't, just asking that question, if you don't come across to the general public as having any kind of spiritual health, or I've never heard you talk about your astrological sign, me asking you that question is going to catch you off guard. And so that's going to go first of all, what is that? I don't know. Okay, cool. Let's pull up CoStar. Let's look at all this stuff. Let's kind of go down deeper into that area. So what's your sun, moon, and rising? What are your top 3 movies? What's your favorite snack at the movies? What pizza toppings do you get? What's your guilty pleasure? What's a toxic trait that you think you have? And what would you say is one that maybe a friend or a significant other would say you have? What's the last song that you listen to? Like pull up your Spotify playlist kind of thing. And what's your favorite workout song? So those are some of my go-to just random questions. And then I've got a couple other subfolders around just entrepreneurship. So I would pick like categories: entrepreneurship, pastimes, cooking, family history. And then I'll kind of just dive deeper into those categories. One in particular that I've seen work well for YouTube is if someone just clicked on this podcast, can you tell me the reason why they should stick around? So immediately, as a listener, I'm going, oh, I wasn't thinking about that, but yeah, why should I stick around? Even if I know you or know the show, tell me why I should keep listening, kind of thing. And then another one, follow up, and I forget where I got these, but this is not a Chase Chewning original. In 1 to 2 hours after this episode is over, what is the audience? What are they going to have that they didn't have when they started? And yeah, so I've just got folder after folder, stuff like that.
Dude, those are so great. And I wouldn't be doing my job for the listeners if I didn't ask a few of those.
Oh,
an hour and a half later, what is something that you want listeners to take away, to still have from listening to this conversation? And we might have touched on it. We might not have yet.
I'll say this just because I think it's very important and something that I hope everybody can hear and mull over. And we have not talked about this at all, but know that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Just whatever's going on in your head, in your heart, in your life, at work, in relationships, your bank account. A phrase, a mantra that has brought me a lot of peace, a lot of growth, a lot of perspective, a lot of everything. A lot of other questions, a lot of pain and discomfort at first, but a lot of growth and happiness afterwards, is even if I believe that, because it's easier, because, oh, I'm pretty comfortable today. Like, oh, I got money in the bank account. Oh, my wife's happy. Oh, my job's good. I got a baby coming. So even if at first I can just go, all these positive things, these quote good things are happening, or even if you're like, God, it's been a shit day. I haven't worked out in a week. I don't know where my next paycheck's coming from, family issues, whatever. Just that mindset shift of I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. One, gives me gratitude for all the positive things and just makes me kind of just sit there and appreciate that more. And two, if it's more difficult, then it gets me to work faster on changing my situation.
That's a great reminder for anyone listening to this. But was there a season when you felt like you were not where you were supposed to be, where you felt like you wanted to be anywhere but where you were. And then you look back and you're like, shit, that fucking phrase applied so well to that time when I thought I wanted to be anywhere but where I was.
My 36th birthday. So I'm about to turn 39. My birthday's in a couple of weeks here, October 5th. And when I turned 36, I learned how to change my mind. And I didn't realize up to that point how stuck in my ways I was. Even though, whether it was ego talking or even just, truly believing, I'm a good person, I'm doing good things, I live by the rules, I follow the rules, I do all these air quote good things. I realized that the majority of my life, I was not living for myself, and I was living for someone else. Even if I believe, even objectively, these are good morals, good ethics, good, being a good person. Why did I believe that? Why did I care so much about only doing those things, only believing those things, only reinforcing those things? And I began to question everything. And I questioned everything that I thought was good in my life. And I questioned everything that I was coming up to my edges against. And I felt resistance, and I felt friction, and I felt
What's an
discomfort.
Example of something that you're like, man, I believed this for 36 years and now I don't know if I do.
It sounds really simple, but my friends used to call me, Officer Chewning or Sergeant Chewning, when I was in the military. And I was that guy. If we're standing on, I say this example all the time. I was that guy. If we're about to cross the street, I would not have walked across the street. I would not have jaywalked because the light was red at a hand said, do not walk, because that was the right thing to do. And I would wait for the sign to go. I mean, my friends, my wife, they would all leave me. They're like, Chase, there's literally no cars coming for miles. What do you do? I'm like, no. We have to stay here. And, that seems like a really dumb, simple example, but I just took that and I was like, all right, if that's how you act just crossing the street, if that's your belief system in what is quote right or wrong of just crossing the street, when you can clearly look and see there is no danger and make a choice for yourself, I took that and kind of just laid it over every area of my life. And, it was a unique time period for me and everybody. It was in the heart of COVID, and here in LA, COVID restrictions were just wild. One day, no one gave a shit. The next day, everything was locked down. The next day, you had to have proof of vaccine to pump your gas. And then the next day, you could go to an after hours party or you could hang out outside or do whatever. Or I could go to a happy hour mixer at my outdoor gym, no mask, because they were serving alcohol, they were serving drinks, serving food. But the next morning, 7 a.m., when we would go to the same spot outdoors, working out, bettering our bodies, we had to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. Explain that to me. Not to go down a COVID rabbit hole, but
that was like rule overload.
Right. You. Yeah. And so, someone who spent 6 years active duty in the Army, someone who grew up in a very small town, religious household in the Bible Belt of Southwest Virginia, going to church every Sunday, going to a small private Christian school for middle school, high school. I was the child. I was the poster boy for rules and right and wrong. And I'm very grateful for a lot of that. It gave me discipline. It gave me morals and ethics and personal values, structure. Mm-hmm. But, even the good parts of that weren't mine. And so I just took that model of walk, don't walk, and applied it to my entire life, and just flipped everything on its head. And, to kind of get back to your original question, it showed me where I was that I didn't want to be. And it showed me what got me to those places. And I realized that ultimately it was all me. As a 36-year-old man, Chase, if you're not going to start thinking for yourself, acting for yourself, doing for yourself, being for yourself, then no one's going to do it for you.
Dude, so many questions that I want to ask about that. I want to give listeners a chance to hear your background from your words leading up to that. But then I want to come back to that moment at 36. Yeah. Would you give listeners the background and your words of Chase Chewning, podcaster, entrepreneur, health coach, Army vet, military vet, Your Army.
yeah,
That's right. Okay. I was tiptoe around the sensitivities. We just had a Navy SEAL on the podcast.
No, you would insult me if I said it was in the Air Force. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, can you give us a background up to that 36, what you're doing, and who you are, and you touched on a little bit of it, but then I want to come back to that.
So I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Roanoke, Virginia, on like 160 some acres, just in the literally middle of nowhere. It was just, we were in a small little stretch, a small little valley with a creek running through it, and just mountains all around. I went
to school at Wake Forest, so I know that part of the world. I know that part of the world extremely well.
Yeah. So we're right, basically we're the backyard of Virginia Tech.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so grew up small town Virginia, and I never want to paint this picture that I was unhappy with my childhood, or just this poor, destitute, poverty-stricken kid or family. It wasn't like that. We didn't have a lot of money, but I never knew any better. I had the most loving, supportive family, even though my parents split up when I was about 5 years old. So, quote, broken home, childhood divorce. But I had the best role model of a father. We lived with my grandparents at the time. My grandmother, I consider still, a mother figure to me. Shortly after that, my dad remarried, and my stepmom was a huge part of my life. And so I grew up the oldest of three, just living, playing out in the woods all the time, in the garden with my grandparents, just getting my hands dirty, getting into trouble, eating the food that we just grew in the garden. And it was great. It was fantastic. And, we grew up very religious. My dad and grandparents were Catholic. Then we kind of molded into Southern Baptist. And so it was every Sunday we're going to church. And then they plucked me out of public school, very much against my will at the time, because they thought I was going down a wrong path kind of thing. And so I went to this private Christian school for 7th grade up through high school, and which I honestly thoroughly enjoyed. I got to say this line because it makes me sound great, but I dated half the girls in my class and graduated the top 6 in my class. There were 2 girls. One was my best friend and one was my girlfriend, and then there's only 6 people in my grade. And
dude, that's you. There's a little bit of a roller coaster there. But I got to say, the roller coaster also ends with you kind of outcompeted a lot of guys for a very small pool of girls. So well done.
Yeah.
There's actually quite the highlight when you do the math of that many guys chasing after.
I had the stats in my favor for a couple different things.
Yeah.
And so that was my upbringing, my childhood. It didn't come from a lot, but I didn't know any better because we had love and I had fun, and just I was always connected to people and connected to source and connected to community. And then the time came to kind of figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up and what was going to be the next steps. And everybody around me was going to tour colleges and taking SATs and applying, blah, blah, blah. And I had this conversation with my dad, and he was an Army vet himself. And he told me, Chase, I would love to just show you what I did. I would love to show you the military. I'd seen he was active duty. We went to a lot of his bases. He was back and forth a lot. And so I kind of had this glimpse into that world growing up, and I love my dad for it. Hell, he was our scoutmaster for a while, and nothing's cooler than your Army 101st Airborne dad being your scoutmaster. Like, you're the coolest kid in the club. And, and he kind of showed me his world. We met with a recruiter, and I got a glimpse of that. And then I'll never forget this kind of thing he said. I would love to ask him. I can't now. He passed in 2005. If this was his meaning or this was just my interpretation of what he said. But he looked at me and he goes, Chase, if you want to go to college, I'll figure out a way to make it happen. And I took that as, there's no college fund. Like there's no money to send me to school, but I did okay in school and I could get into college if I wanted. But I realized that if I make that choice, I believed at that time that I was going to cause financial burden to my family. And I didn't want that. And so that, coupled with the whole concept of I didn't really, really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I was like, I'm not going to go to college and waste my time and waste their money and just, dig around for a while. So this whole aspect of legacy was pretty cool. So I was like, my dad served in the Army. My uncle was a Marine. My grandfather was a World War II Army vet, so on and so forth. Like literally every generation of my family, a Chewning has served. my dad did the research all the way back to, I think, like the Civil War.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah. So I'm the oldest of three. So my generation, I served. My first cousin was in the Air Force. And so we all come from a military background. So that was more appealing to me at the time. So I enlisted Christmas break, my senior year of high school. I'm 17 years old. I swore in. And then after we graduated, about a month later, I shipped off to boot camp, 2003. And so I enlisted for 6 years right out of the gate, did 6 years active duty. I'd planned to kind of stick in and do the whole career thing. I thought, that's amazing. In 20 years, I can retire at 37, have a great pension, all these benefits, have done a lot of things and go on to my next thing in life. And, man plans and God laughs kind of thing. Life had other plans for me. And I was actually preparing for an Afghanistan deployment and got significantly injured. And so much so that I got yanked out of that deployment roster, became a patient really for almost like the next year and a half, blew out my back, tore my hamstring, had both my hips reconstructed. I had to learn how to walk again twice.
And subsequent injuries, or is it one injury that caused all that?
So it was like a couple things leading up to that. We're always getting kind of banged around in the military. And especially at that point, I had chosen, like, I'm doing everything I can to deploy. And to kind of like go off to a side tangent here, it was really because I was in an extreme poor mental health place in my life. My dad had just passed away about a year into my service. He had a really short window and bad battle with ALS. And I just had given up on life. I was never suicidal, but I just didn't care if I woke up. I didn't care if I lived or died. And I was like, oh shit, I'm in the best job in the world to not come home. Yeah. So I could go to work one day if I chose the right, avenue and just come home in a box. And that would be easier at the time. And so I did everything I could. I was taking every deployment opportunity I could, every training I could, every opportunity to get promoted, just to be seen in the way to like send me over there. And I had this opportunity present itself, and I got sent to war game training and tore my hamstring. L4 and L5 vertebrae kind of went one way. The rest of my back went another way. I was leading an ambush against, we call it the OP4, the opposing force. And so basically you're like leading this assault. And I just led my team up over this hill, and just in the heat of it, we're in we call it full battle rattle, body armor, weapon. This was like maybe not even that long, like 3 days out in the field, maybe probably running off of 4 or 5 hours total sleep, dehydrated, all this shit. And just in that instant, just popping up, leading this assault, everything went wrong. And next thing I know, I heard and felt this pop. I thought someone shot me. I was like, I didn't know this. Is this a live fire? Like, what's going on? I blacked out, fell to the ground, woke up, the medevac's pulling me out. And I reached back, and my back is just like killing me. Like I get these weird bulges and things going on. I reach back to my hamstring, and it's coiled up the top of my leg. And I just start like screaming in pain. And I go to the hospital, and then they're like, yeah, Chewning, you're out. You're out. And so then I realized there was a lot more trauma that happened on top of some other injuries that happened leading up to that, to my hips. And they just did complete femoral reconstructive surgery to both of my hips and 2 rods in both. So I was a patient in and out of the hospital, rehab, at home, no job. I literally had like no purpose for about a year and a half. And once I got to a point to where I could walk again fully on my own, they deemed me non-deployable. And once you kind of get that in the military, for 99% of us, that's kind of a death sentence. They have no purpose for you anymore. So they medically discharged me. And at 24, I loaded up my wheelchair to the top of my SUV and threw my cane in the back seat, hopped in my SUV, and drove off base for the last time. Drove back to Virginia to like start my life over.
Given a life sentence.
Yeah, but
instead of
it was a life sentence,
what you were
not a death sentence.
Yeah, what you were kind of maybe subconsciously aiming for.
Yeah, and looking back, I firmly believe that a higher power, my dad, God, something recognized that I was getting in my way. I was getting in my own way, and I was heading down a path that had no good ending to it. And so I firmly believe that injury saved my life. And I firmly believe that my dad dying saved my life, because it was just a matter of weeks of getting out of that situation, moving back home, and realizing I've been given a second chance. I've been given this opportunity. How am I going to use it? And so here I am, this 24-year-old kid, on a cane. I decided to enroll in school, VCU, Richmond, Virginia, which was right where my younger brother was about to go. We're 4 years apart. So I was like, okay,
great basketball program.
Great. Yeah. Go Rams, go. Shaka Smart came in, did us dirty, then left. And so I'm this 24-year-old kid on a cane enrolling for exercise science. And I'm here to learn the human body. I'm here to just take it all in, and because I needed it. I needed to learn, like, I was not willing to accept this new set of orders. You know, hey, Chewning, you're broken. Hey, good luck working out. You're never going to run again. You're probably going to have like a weird limp. You're probably going to have the surgery again. Goodbye to the life that you knew it in terms of just day-to-day behaviors, pain, what you can tolerate, your job. And I just wasn't willing to accept that. And so I committed to learning the human body. So I studied exercise science. It helped me rehab in ways that no other physical therapist or rehabilitation specialist could at that point. And I just fell in love with it. And I decided, like, this is my thing. This is what I'm going to do. So I began to kind of like get involved in some few odd jobs here and there, and, you know, training. And then I found health coaching, and then I got into more the clinical model. And so I began working as a health coach in a chain of concierge medical practices. Did that for about a year or two, and then became the wellness director. So I was, you know, seeing patients every day. I ran 2 clinics out of Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. I would see patients, clients every day. We would do exercise physiology testing, weight loss programs, lifestyle behavior modification. I would also work one-on-one with their doctors to go, hey, like, these are the labs, this is their preconditioning, these are the medications. How do we get them off medications? How do we, you know, reverse diabetes? How do we kind of help them implement these behavior changes? And then I also ran the department, the wellness department. So I would see patients out of 2. I ran and managed like 7 to 9 other offices and did that for 3-4 years. And then it was that last year at that job where I discovered podcasting and decided to do my own. And it made me so much better at my job. And then it was about 6-8 months into that I was like, all right, I got to get out. I need to do my own thing. I was just getting overworked. I was undervalued. I was quite literally doing the job of 4 people at this last company and barely getting the compensation I was due for the one. And so I was just like, all right, I'm just going to roll the dice, step out on my own. I launched my own online health coaching company, doubled down on the podcast, learned how to monetize a podcast. So the podcast started making literally a couple $100 like a month, and did my own coaching company for a couple of years. Did both for the next like 2 years, and both grew. I had this great health coaching app. I had about 8 other coaches that I, you know, kind of worked through the app all across the country. The podcast was growing like crazy, and I hired a fitness business coach to help me scale the coaching company, because that's what I went to school for. I got my master's in health promotion, got all the letters after my name, because I thought that's who I was. And in the first phone call, he's like, Chase, you won't shut up talking about, you won't stop talking about the podcast. You won't stop talking about all these other guests and things that you're doing with that. So I paid this guy a decent amount of money to talk me out of growing my coaching company. And so after that call, I shut down the coaching company and decided to go all in on the podcast.
Later? An hour later, 3 weeks later?
20 minutes.
No way.
20 minutes in that first phone call.
You didn't have to think about it. I got to think about this for 2 or 3 days.
And that's the power of a good coach and a good mentor. They will mirror back to you the truth that you are lying to yourself about or just scared to say out loud yet. And that's what he did. And 20 minutes into that phone call, I was like, you're right. I'm shutting down the coaching company. I'm going all in on the podcast. And that was summer 2019. Yeah. And now I just do Everforward Radio ever since. And then kind of as that grew and evolved, I kind of became the guy a lot of other people came to for podcasting help. Entrepreneur light bulb moment went off. I was like, oh, I got something here. So I created courses. That's when courses were all the rage, excuse me. And so I created courses to teach people how to record, edit, launch, monetize, interview tactics. People would go through the courses and tell me, Chase, that was too good. This is way more work than I thought. How much do you charge just to do it? I was like, oh, okay, another light bulb moment. So I began to take on editing and production work. And then I grew a production team. And then 2 years into that, I created the studios, and now here we are.
That is, again, there's so many questions I'd want to ask around that. I certainly so much to learn on the podcasting front, even
Me too.
5 years in.
Me too, yeah.
But there's an innate curiosity that I think drives the conversations where I lose track of time into whatever the person is saying, because the human experience is just so universal and there's so much to relate to or dive into. When you said, you've mentioned source, God, your spiritual upbringing, what is your spiritual background today? And do you mind telling listeners you've got—
He's looking at my beads, everybody.
You've got beads on. I would love to know the background. You got beads on beads on beads.
So, okay, actually, so these all have stories. So if you're watching the video here, so I have these red and kind of amber beads. These were, so I mentioned YouTube, right? I got my start in YouTube, and predominantly I would do like men's lifestyle, fitness, fashion blog kind of stuff. You know, people painted me as this picture as Chase dresses well, Chase has his shit together. And so I just lean into that. So, oh, if this is what you perceive me to be, then I'll be it. And so I was like this Dapper Dan style guy. And this is from this company. I don't know if they're still around. They're called Sprezzabox. And it was like this men's monthly subscription company where it was like $30-$40 and they would send you like ties or cool socks or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I just love these beads. And this was the first drop in the bucket to the Chase that you see today. That Chase living in DC was wearing a button down, tucked in, chino pants, belt, dress shoes, was,
following the rules.
Exactly. But just something about the beads. I was like, I like the beads. I like them. And so now it just feels so natural. And actually I wore these. This is part of the box that I got on my wedding month, which actually today is my anniversary, my 8th anniversary.
Congrats.
Thank you. And so this is a black one. This is actually a Louis Vuitton. This was a present from— oh, she's going to murder me. I think either my wife or my in-laws, I think I got as either a birthday present or a graduation gift from master's school or my master's program. And this is actually a Lokai bracelet. You familiar with Lokai?
No.
So Lokai is this company. They make these beaded bracelets. They're kind of like rubbery. And it actually has water from Mount Everest and sand from, I forget the desert. But the whole point is to remind you that, at any moment you can be at the highest high or the lowest low. And I had, their founder, and shout out Steven, on the show last year. And so these are all kind of just like reminders of, and it's camo too. So this kind of takes me back to my army. So all kind of just reminders of the versions of me that like to come out or that I know that have always been there. The black leather Louis Vuitton designer, it's every once in a while I like to be a little bougie, I like to be nice, and it's a reminder for me too that it's not bad for me to want nice things. It's not bad for me to, spend a couple $100 on a bracelet versus, I don't know, like $25. Right. And these are a reminder of kind of where I began. For some reason, these called out to me 8 years ago as a side of me that was not yet ready to come out to the world. And, and again, these is just, I love Lokai, I love their mission and, the camo. I joked when I got out of the army, I'm never going to wear camo again. Now it's like half my wardrobe. And
people that can't see this, he's wearing army green right now.
I just love loam green, army green. And so my necklace, these mala beads, these are volcano stone and amber. And I went to Tulum, goes to Tulum once, right? I went to Tulum like 3 years ago for a wedding. And kind of like true to form for me, how I buy a lot of my clothes, which is usually just Lululemon. I walk by a mannequin in a men's clothing store, and I'm like, I like the whole mannequin.
Dude, I used to do that when I remember doing that, and it's so weird that I even did that when I was like, I remember doing that in second grade.
Really?
Just being like, yeah, that whole outfit.
I like that look.
The whole outfit. And that's what I'm going to. That's my head. I'm like, that's what I'm going to look like tomorrow at school.
I'm going to look like this mannequin with no face,
right,
but like have really good clothes. Yeah. And so I walked by this mannequin in this boutique shop in Tulum, and it was like this linen kind of like oversized t-shirt, cut off t-shirt, and like these linen pants, and it just looked very comfortable. And he had this necklace on, and so I bought the whole thing. And I actually thought I lost this necklace, and so I went back to Tulum the next year. Found the same boutique shop. They had literally, this was the last one, bought it again. And kind of like what we do when we lose stuff, like you replace it, next thing you know, you found it. I came back home, looked in another bag, and it was there. So now I have two of these. So this is a reminder of not only how much I love this necklace, I bought it twice, but to stop being lazy chase and like really go look for things,
Very cool.
Yeah.
What is your spiritual background today?
So I grew up Southern Baptist, and I'll say I never fully was able to step into the Christian faith in the way that I felt a lot of my peers and even my family did. I appreciated it. It gave me a lot of morals and ethics, and I think there are a lot of great lessons in there. And I'm not knocking Christianity by any means, but what it did, it kind of showed me that I didn't completely throw it out the window, but it didn't hit me in the heart. You know, I wasn't overcome by the Holy Spirit kind of thing. But I did recognize that, of course, like there has to be a creator, where there has to be a source. Like there's no way this is all just, in my opinion, just random design. Like we are all connected in some way. Mm-hmm. And then,
dude, I asked ChatGPT yesterday. It's like, given everything that you know about the universe without bias, do you think there is a grand design to it or random chance?
What did it pop out?
And it said, given everything that I know without bias, it seems to, I seem to lean, I can't remember the exact wording. Yeah. I seem to lean towards it having a grand design because there are too many universal laws that govern the entire universe. Yeah. And when I thought about it, I was like, it was probably maybe an hour later, I thought like, that is interesting that there are all these things that seem to be different and are created disparate, disconnected, planets over here, galaxies over there, humans over here, bugs over there. But there are these laws that govern it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you really disconnect from like a personification of the divine, if it needed to be 1,000-foot tall man with a gray beard, you disconnect from these idiotic or juvenile, not idiotic, but very juvenile notions of what a God is or a spiritual force is. And you get to just plain old, but also crazy universal laws that govern everything.
We don't need to speak the same language, but can have the same truths.
Yeah, it's very
wild.
And planets, stars, all have these same truths.
Yeah.
That it does seem
ancient civilizations, modern civilizations.
Right. Yeah. Right. It does seem. I mean, every modern major world tradition has so many similarities to it, and then they map perfectly to the last like 7-8 years of the psychedelic third wave revolution, where it's like, they've been taught, they must be onto something because like the tiny little square millimeter of LSD showed me something that atheists don't seem to be talking about. There's something else. So it does. It was very interesting that ChatGPT answered that way.
That's funny.
But
it's funny you bring that up because that kind of, that was my upbringing, and it kind of gave me, it was like this knocking of like, there's something there. There's some kind of like connection to source. There's some kind of like spiritual aspect to you, Chase, but this isn't it. And I was talking about earlier in my 36th birthday, when I learned how to change my mind, it was through psychedelic medicine.
Yes. Tell me more. I'm so glad he brought us back to 36.
So I reached a point in my world of healing from the death of my father. I finally got diagnosed with PTSD, and it was just, long story short, losing my father completely wrecked my life. And for many, many, many years, I just didn't deal with anything.
Sounds like what you said 10 minutes ago.
Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I decided, like, I've been working on myself for years. I've been working on getting through this grief and through this loss for years in any and every which way I know possible. That chase crossing the street, waiting for the light to turn, white or green or whatever, had finally had enough. And I researched and dove into psychedelic medicine. And oddly enough, at that time, my wife, who was a new nurse practitioner, newish, and she started working, she was running a clinic not far from here as the medical provider and clinic manager for a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy clinic. And so I became a patient of hers and went through CAP, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. So it's traditional therapy coupled with ketamine. And you go in and it's administered via IM, intramuscular, and you have therapy. I did individual and group, kind of little combination. I did a group with a small veterans group, which kind of helped me tiptoe into this world because it's just, I felt this level of safety and brotherhood to really deep dive. And I recognized that I need to deep dive. I need to just completely let go of all control. And I just want to at least know that I can check this off as to something I tried, because I can't keep living like this. I can't keep having panic attacks. I can't keep just not being able to think about my dad and just going into a deep, dark place. And it was just it was presenting roadblocks in my life. And I was like, I want to put this in my past. And all the science and even, anecdotal experience I had found really showed, especially for, all right, you've tried everything else. Ketamine therapy can really help kind of non-treatment specific depression, PTSD, anxiety, things like that.
And for listeners, for many states, it's as easy as going into a clinic. For the doctor, this is not like...
Yeah, you get a medical consult, you get cleared.
Completely legal and doctor assisted. Yeah.
And so I did it. And in the first scenario, I had the most profound experience in my life. I had an ego death, fully died, separated from my body, met my father, had the most profound experience of like healing and that it's okay to let go. And it's literally several hours long other podcasts to kind of dive into this stuff. And I'm really downplaying the experience, but ketamine therapy. And then I went on to, through MDMA, went through psilocybin. These plant medicines, these psychedelic substances literally saved my life and gave me my life back and taught me how to change my mind and think differently, and opened up my mind and my heart and connection to source in a way that finally felt right. And like, Chase, this is that kind of inkling you had way back when you were a kid. And so now, my spiritual practice is just that full recognition through experience of connection to everyone, everywhere, all the time, to source, to love, and the realization that, I think source, I think God is everybody. I think you are God, I am God, we are all God. I think we are all connected through consciousness. And it's the oldest
in terms of continuous study, it's the oldest philosophical concept we have in humanity, coming from the Vedas.
Absolutely, yeah.
Advaita Vedanta's 8,000 years said this very thing that is in the West obviously quite controversial at best, at worst heretical to say anything like that. It's like, this is the oldest idea we have, is that we are so much more than these physical bodies or this illusion of plurality or separateness. And yet, man, talk about rules. Jaywalking.
That went against every fiber of my being.
Right.
Yeah,
it is beaten out. We're not allowed to touch on that subject. We're not allowed to talk about it, think about it. It's
I didn't even smoke a joint or look at marijuana or anything until I was like 28 years old, because I firmly believe if I use drugs, I will burn and die in hell. There's like this fear of like character and like what kind of person does that. And I had to really, really let go of all that. But I think it took me getting to a point in my mental health of, I've got to do something. I have to try something. I'm willing to do anything, because the way that my life is going is not good. Mm-hmm. And I am not willing to accept this for the rest of my life, much less, another day. And luckily, I think we're at a point now with scientific literature and clinical evidence. And what really kind of sealed the deal for me was the Veterans Affairs Department even coming out with ketamine therapy and psilocybin therapy for veterans and treatment of PTSD, anxiety, depression. And I was like, okay, cool. So like, if one of the main governing bodies of why you do or don't do something in your life, Chase, is saying that we're using this stuff to treat the stuff that you have, change your mind, give it a chance.
Yeah, it is quite ironic that this thing it was so demonized, villainized, and pushed under the rug. All of the positive research, completely shunned by the government, is now ironically recognizing, hey, we kind of need to do this for our veterans.
Transform my life, transform my marriage, transform my business. And in my personal experience, these transformations happened in the first experience.
Wow.
The first experience.
How did it compare? I feel like I've got to do the job for the listeners to ask, how did it compare to the MDMA experience? Or you said MDMA and psilocybin afterwards?
Yeah. So MDMA. If
you could only do one of those.
If I could only do one for the rest of my life, psilocybin. Like the way that I feel on mushrooms on psilocybin is the most like, this is how I'm supposed to be all the time. I've never felt more connected, more rooted, more just like, oh, this is Chase. Like this is my life. It's amazing. But ketamine, and I've used ketamine recreationally once in a very small dose. I didn't like it. And it was after I had it in a therapeutic experience. And for me, it's kind of like, I feel like I'm disrespecting it. I know what I've gone through and the healing that I've had using ketamine medically administered ketamine that way. And so I feel that kind of personal connection to it. And so MDMA was the very first psychedelic I ever tried. And it was and this was the moment where old Chase completely flipped. This was like the height of COVID. There was really nothing to do.
This was before ketamine?
Before ketamine. Okay. There was LA was shut down. And I went to this party in the hills, and literally someone who I have known for years, I trust, love, respect, just reached out his hand. It's like, take this. And what was probably half a second felt like an eternity. My entire life just flashed before my eyes. It's like, Chase, what kind of party is this? What kind of people is this? You thought you knew this guy. Why is he giving you drugs? What are you going to do? Are you going to do it? You're going to do it. You're going to do it. What are people going to think of you? And I'm pretty sure I said, fuck it. And so I took the pill, and everybody freaked their shit. They're like, Chase, did you just took that pill? No way. And that night, I had this realization about this thing in my marriage that I thought was a problem with her. And I realized undoubtedly it was a problem with me. And that issue has never come up again. And that issue opened up my heart in a way, like it gets me emotional just thinking about it. Because I realized like how many times before that I was in my own way, and I was in the way of my marriage. And I was reducing the capacity for my marriage in this relationship. And I got home many hours later, and I just started crying, and I started apologizing to my wife. And it like, I don't want to say it saved my marriage, because my marriage was not going down that, but we had a great marriage, but it was like this one recurring thing that just was like the biggest thing and the only thing. And I had this realization about how I was the problem, and I had a problem with that thing, and it wasn't her. And I realized the true intention behind it. And so I just apologized, and I cried, and I was like, there is no way that is bad. If that substance gave me that realization in and of myself, for myself, but also for the person I care most about, how can this be bad? And so that opened up my mind, opened up my heart. And then after that, pretty sure after MDMA, I tried Psilocybin. I tried like microdosing first a little bit. I kind of tiptoed my way in. Kind of the old exercise science, health coach in me. I studied everything. I looked at, the research and application, and, the stacks and the doses and all that stuff.
Self-experimentation the right way.
Yeah, be a study of 1, N equals 1. And so I went from MDMA to Psilocybin and then ketamine. And now I'll say this, I recreationally use MDMA a couple times a year. I'm a big fan of microdosing. I went on this microdosing protocol of psilocybin for a month, and it transformed my business. It opened up my heart and my head in ways I never thought possible. It increased my HRV by 42%. 42%.
It's heart rate variability.
So the physiological benefits were just
wow. No one ever talks about that.
Yeah, and I have years of data on my Whoop leading up to that. I went on this protocol for a month. That month, the next month, over a course of 4 months, an increase of 42%. And then ketamine therapy is something that I have come back to this year. 2024 has demanded the most of me. It has opened up things that I thought I had closed. And I reached a healing point with my PTSD and the death of my father that truly was like, okay, that chapter's closed. But it then opened up a lot of other things that I didn't realize were there, that I could not have access, because that trauma was so overwhelming and powerful that it literally just blanketed everything else in my life. 2024, I'm literally joking about it. It's not funny, but this is the worst year of my mental health ever.
More so than 2000.
I've gone
5, 6,
8 days. 8 days this year is the longest stretch I've gone without a panic attack. And not just like, I'm stressed out. No, full blown convulsing, disoriented, not sure when I am, where I am.
God bless.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and like in public, I've had them like in New York City, in the airport, in the gym. I've had one during a podcast interview. I had one while I was driving. That was very scary. And just, then I'm just done. I'm done for that day, done for like the next day. And and it's just been a wild ride. And so now I've come back to ketamine therapy. It's something I do every week, every other week at this point. I kind of stagger it based on the experiences that I have. And the more profound experience that I have, the more work that I do afterwards in terms of integration and really just thinking about it, journaling it, sharing with my wife and friends. And but it's something I've come back to because it is, besides all the regular practices of working out a few times a week, going to bed at the same time, good diet, just taking care of my body, my mind as much as possible. That is the only thing that helps me not stay stuck in my mental health. I've regularly been with a therapist this year as well for the first time in years.
Man, it seems to overlap with things couldn't be going better and all of the things that you'd be.
This year, I've never been in a worse mental health period of my life, but I have never been in the biggest growth period of my life. My business has never been better. I've never been, I wake up and just opportunity. Like I can't explain it. I wake up and like, my bank account just keeps growing. I'm like, where did this money come from? And it's like, I'm reinvesting everything and I'm growing and opening new studios and getting all these amazing guests and just, travel and all the, also coupled with, oh, you're going to break down in the TSA line and be escorted out to a private terminal.
Well, if that's not liberating to know that Chase at 20% can deliver 100% of what Chase outlined years before, then that's got to be liberating from this illusion so many of us are under of like, I've got to operate at 110% every moment of every day. And I've heard different friends talk about this. There's a great podcaster that we both know that I mentioned before the show, and for 2 years was in a really dark spot. But as a podcaster and comedian, it's like, everything kept growing. Mm-hmm. And about 18 months into being in that really dark spot, he realized at least he could feel bad, but he doesn't need to feel bad about feeling bad.
Oh, yeah.
To where he's like, oh, actually I'm hit with one arrow, but I don't need to just like self-inflict, the other side of me with another arrow, feeling bad about feeling bad, because I don't need to fear that I'm going to lose what I've worked for at that time, 17, 18 years in the making. Mm-hmm. In his career, he's like, it took him 18 months. And then I don't think it's by coincidence, 6 months later, he's out of it because half of it, maybe 75% of that fear evaporated because he's like, well, I can still, in my mind, this isn't my best work, but people are loving it more than ever, that it was really liberating for him to realize, shit, I can kind of show up, feel like shit, and give the same performance, give the same product that people are wanting.
Well, on top of that, to keep the Chase Pity train rolling, my wife and I have been trying to get pregnant for almost a year and a half. And we got pregnant and then we went through a miscarriage at the beginning of this year. And that was right when all this other stuff started going sideways for me. And that really, really stung. And then we got pregnant again. And now we are. And we've got a beautiful, healthy, knock on wood, still baby boy growing in the oven, coming in a few months. And where I'm at with it all now is, ditto everything you just said, but also source, God, whatever is taking this year with me to prepare me to get my shit together, to bring up every other shadow that I was not aware of or wasn't paying attention to face that this year, and is also rewarding me for the last 7 years of all the hard work that I've been putting in with the podcast and, my businesses and all this other stuff. Everything is coming to a head in the most perfect storm possible. And I have chosen to believe that it is to get me ready. And I've been given this opportunity. I've been given this year to get my shit together.
Get it all out, to sweat it out.
Yeah, to get my shit together, to get it out, but also like to get the business to a point to where when my son comes, I'm going to take some fucking time. I'm going to step back, be with my son, be with my family, and then I'll come back. That's
a beautiful, that's a beautiful perspective and probably pretty accurate, especially given that unique, strong relationship you must have had with your father and child of divorce, father passing away. It's probably built in deeply within you of, okay, how do I sweat all the toxins out and give my son the best version of me?
Yeah. That's what I'm choosing to believe, and that's what I'm leaning into. And, but then again, who knows?
Well, dude,
who knows?
The stars, it turns out stars do not align. It is our perspective that aligns them.
I like that.
That's straight physics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our perspective that aligns them. So it's our choice that aligns all the stars that we want to be aligned. It's your choice. It is your perspective. That's a beautiful one. To round out the conversation, because I know we're bumping up on time, outside of the psychedelic side of things, being a health coach, being someone that's going through a really tough mental health year, thank you so much for sharing that so openly, by the way. It's so beautiful. And this is why people should listen to Chase and his podcast, because it is such a wide open aperture of candor and honesty that it makes it's such a beautiful thing to listen to someone so open and so on. So, I mean, I could have double clicked, triple clicked, pinched, zoomed on like 7 of those things that you mentioned, but I'll just suffice to say people should check out your podcast, which we'll link to in the show notes. Outside of the psychedelic side of things, what are some of the products or practices that you'd put in your top 5? I know Magic Mind is one of them.
It's in the fridge here in the studio. Yeah, absolutely.
Outside of that, or including that, what are some of the top 3 or 5 that you also incorporate that, if psychedelics might be a little too far for people, or they aren't ready for something like that, or they just aren't, it's not a fit for them. What are the 3 or 5 things that legal, more accessible that you've incorporated that you've been like, man, I'll give you the quick, pro tips?
One, committing to regular mental health work this year for me has been paramount, and committing through particularly therapy. And, therapy for me has been, it's not always like, oh my God, this best revelation ever. I feel just so seen and heard and loved. Other times it's, I think I got something out of it. But that's the point, I think, of therapy is you're not always meant to really understand or get that insight in the moment, but in my opinion, the importance is the commitment to that kind of work, the commitment to putting in the reps. Just like if you go to the gym and you do 3 sets of bicep curls, you're not going to walk out, maybe a little saturation, a little blood flow, a little pump. You're not going to walk out with, permanently changed, bigger, stronger, better biceps or whatever the muscle is. Being still a certified health coach and made fitness a big part of my life, I've understood the importance of reps, the importance of compounding interest, basically. If I choose to do a couple of right things for my body today, I'm going to look back in 30 days, 6 months, a year, and go, man, like I'm really glad I chose to do a few of those reps. And that's the results and the experience I'm having now with therapy. Also because I didn't have that a part of my kind of like protocols and stuff. And so I felt like spiritual health and mental health commitment, hard time were things that I had not fully devoted to. And so I was like, all right, I want to add these into my life now. And then that way I know for sure in a year, 2 years, I can say yes, no kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So therapy, but like tangible things, products. There's this product called Strong Coffee Company. I'm a big coffee snob. I mean, my dad, after he got out of the Army, he opened up coffee houses. So I grew up in my family's business. And it sounds weird to say, but it's instant coffee. Don't let that throw you. It's fantastic. It's instant organic coffee. You can make hot or iced, but it's infused with collagen, MCTs, hyaluronic acid, coconut water extract, L-theanine, and depending on the version you get, you can even have reishi, this functional mushroom, adaptogens like ashwagandha. And so it just really, like I've been drinking that 4 to 5 days a week for the last 6 years. And it is part of my ritual. I love the ingredients. I love the team. I love the founder. So I know the love that goes into that product, but also like I feel so on every day when I drink it. That's one. Other little supplements that I really enjoy and reach for, sometimes daily, but otherwise, situational dependent. Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is this incredible adaptogen. Yeah. So good, so good. It's also great for men too. With regular use, we've seen a lot of clinical evidence. It can help, coupled with exercise, sleep, all the things. It can help guys increase testosterone. So ashwagandha is another one. I love L-theanine. CBD this year, I've found a lot of comfort and helping me kind of like down regulate and, getting my body to calm down by using ashwagandha, L-theanine, and CBD, like a full spectrum high dose CBD. And then
do you have a brand that you like?
Cured Nutrition. I keep Cured in the studio here. They've got CBD, gummies, capsules, other functional mushroom products. I've been using them, loving them since like 2018. Again, love the founder, love the team.
And that's Cured?
Cured Nutrition.
C-U-R-E-D?
C-U-R-E-D, yeah, Cured Nutrition. I love them. And then also I really, letting go of things has been as equally as important as adding the right things. This year, I've gotten so frustrated. I really try to be a man of my word, and I try to show up for the people and things that I say I'm going to show up for and to. And this year, because of the miscarriage, because of my mental health, because of, hey, I can't make this meeting we had scheduled for 2 months because I'm currently balled up in a corner on the floor, and I've been here for like 2 hours. I've been having to let go of like, Chase, that doesn't mean you're any less of a man or any less of a honest person or any less of a podcast or any less of anything. And then, that coupled with, I've pulled back and I've made white space, and I've tried to keep white space. I had to really let go of these things just popping up and taking over my time. And so what I did like 2 months ago, I've been putting out 2 episodes a week for years. And I did the math and I was like, all right, if all this other stuff keeps blowing up and I'm getting so stressed out and worried because I can't keep these obligations or I have no time, I got to take my time back. And so I did the math. And so I was like, if I cut back on an episode a week, I literally got back about 10 hours a week. That's a lot of time.
For deep work, that's like 2 days of deep work.
Yeah. So I made the choice and shared with my audience, hey, I'm just doing 1 episode a week right now. And it's been a couple months. And then the hard part about if you're a high performer and, business owner or whatever is not filling that time. So I now I schedule all my other stuff and I keep that white space because it's been proven to me this year that something's going to come up. Something needs my attention. I want to, my wife and I, we have more medical appointments now. And so, I've just been making sure to keep that white space for a reason because Chase, you took it off for a reason.
Those are awesome. Where can people find out about? Oh, I should ask, what is your experience? How did you first come across Magic Mind, by the way? And what has your experience been? And I always love asking, how do you describe it to people?
So I forget the exact first time I had the product. I believe it was at like a local wellness event or something here in LA. I forget where or when, but that comes to mind first. And then I'm just kind of, engaging more through social media. Your great team has reached out over the last like year or two and, they'll send me some product, or we had the sleep product that came out. I got to try, which is great, by the way. And then also through some PR agencies and just, kind of other really events and just other people, we lean into, hey, what are you trying? What are you doing? What are you using? What's in your bag kind of thing. And so it's great. I love it. I love the ingredients. I love what's in it. I love what's not in it. I really enjoy the taste. It's got like that nice little like, oh, this is health kind of flavor to it. I personally love to keep mine in the refrigerator. I like them chilled.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's clarity, cognition, it's focus, and it's just a great way to kind of just amplify my current state of being and state of mind to just help me be me at a higher level. But also know that I'm not flooding my body with toxins or, artificial flavors or shit ton of caffeine. And just, it's a little treat. Yeah. Like a little treat. Yeah.
How do you describe it to friends?
Ooh, how would I describe Magic Mind? I would say
as a health coach, as someone that people are asking these tips for, and as someone that's been drinking it for 3 years, OG.
For years now. I would say it is a great supplement. It's a great tool to use if you're looking to kind of just go from like a 8 to a 9 or a 9 to a 10. For me, it kind of helps get to that like next little level of focus, through my lens. Because I'm someone personally, I don't really struggle with focus or poor energy. I wake up on my own, like 5 a.m. and I'm just ready to go. And, but you know, I know my baseline, and then I love how I can add that to my baseline and kind of just like level up a little bit. So I would describe it as a way for someone to, if you're doing a lot of the right things already for you and you feel pretty dialed in, I feel like you're going to enjoy just going that next little bit. And for someone maybe who has very few or even none, what they would consider healthy habits, I think it's a great gateway. I think it's a great, you know, a lot of times when we look for healthy products, especially, you know, it's green. So I'm going to say here my words, a green juice or a wheatgrass or a shot of something healthy. They don't normally taste good. You know, and I think that deters a lot of people, especially new people in their wellness journey. Like, man, this doesn't taste good. I'm not going to keep coming back to it. Even if you tell me all the great ingredients.
Right. Or they tried 2 or 3 things 5 years ago. And no, it's got, for me, it's that sweet spot of, it's got the bite. It's got a little bit of that like earthiness to it that tells me health, but then also it's got the sweetness. I keep it chilled. So it's a little bit of that treat aspect. So like my ground itself is going, this is good for you. But the human in me is going, oh, you know, have yourself a little treat. Enjoy yourself. Yeah, that was the goal 4 years ago, was make the absolute best morning ritual concoction and make the best tasting health shot, which, I mean, we accomplished number 1 much earlier than number 2. It was several years and 150 iterations in R&D.
That's impressive.
Before we got it to taste as good as it does. Chase, where can, no more commercial, imagine one, but where can people find out about you and your work?
So I'm pretty much living on 1 or 2 places on Instagram at Chase_Chewning, or now once a week, Everforward Radio, anywhere you listen or watch podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube.
Go check it out. We'll put it in the show notes, like I said, but it really is.
Thank you.
Your coach and mentor all those years ago was completely right. You're built for it. It's so great to listen to you interview guests, as well as like I love it when you get to hear more from you, which is so rare. In fact, I don't know if I've ever said that about a podcast host.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll take that. Thank you. I'll take that feedback. Thank you.
And dude, you had a great list of questions that I'm going to write down, steal, use, that I honestly want to ask you, but in the interest of your time, we'll end it here and then maybe have you back on for a part 2.
This is great. Thank you so much, James. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Chase. Thanks.